I definitely agree, because going back and looking at documentaries and stuff about Studio 54, it was definitely like the club. I mean, anybody went to Studio 54, and the doorman that was there, it was kind of like very strict. Like, if you weren't pretty, you weren't getting in. If you weren't shaving, you weren't getting in. It was kind of like some how low would you go techniques that the ordinary people would go just to get inside and rub elbows with, like, Andy Warhol, Michael Jackson, or the big person of the day.
Right, but see, that was towards the end of that period. But where people who really want to dance and hear the music, they would go to places like the Paradise Garage, where Larry Levan, who was one of the DJ legends, who's no longer with us. I mean, he was, people would go there to watch him play and just, to be part of his trip. He was incredible. I mean, he was an incredible DJ, and he really knew how to work a crowd.
Right, I could definitely see that. And when was it the point that disco kind of sort of had, a big backlash? Because, you had other big record companies during that period, like RSO, Robert Stigwood, responsible for Grease, Saturday Night Fever, the Bee Gees, Casablanca, and it was like during that whole period, and then Disco Sucks, when disco kind of sort of went downhill.
Well, I think, if you don't mind me saying so, I think the reason that happened was, I believe it was somewhere in the Midwest. I'm not sure if it's Chicago or Cleveland or someplace. They had this burning of the 12 inches at some stadium. I'm not exactly sure where it was, but I knew that radio stations, let's face it, they were the king. If you didn't hear it on the radio, then you don't know it. There was no way of getting a song out. Now, we're talking, this is before MTV really caught on and things like this now. And there was really no way for someone to hear a record unless a radio station played it. And like in New York here, they started playing Never Could Say Goodbye by Gloria Gaynor, and the record was selling 20,000 copies a week, and not one radio station was playing it. And nobody could, they'd say, well, how can this happen? And radio realized that, there was another medium that was starting to, get into their territory. And I think that's where the backlash eventually happened. They say, hey, let's see if we can turn this thing around, and that's exactly what they did.
Right, because I believe disco was like so oversaturated at that point. I think Sesame Street made a disco record.
Well, I mean, look, they had even Ethel Merman making a disco record, and I says, my God, I think that's really crossing the line here. I mean, people, and the thing is, people thought they knew so much about disco. All they had to do was a 4/4 beat under a song, and it became a disco record. And of course, you and I know that's not true. But yet people would assume that.
And also, in your other line of credits, you mix songs for MFSB, Love's the Message, BT Express, Do It Till You're Satisfied, The Tramps, Disco Inferno, People's Choice, Do It Any Way You Wanna, The Andrew Truce Connection, More, which we'll get into after this, and First Choice, Dr. Love. Now, let's talk about the period when disco ended and going into the 80s, and how did you feel about New Wave?
I personally like New Wave. You're always going to have changes in music. That happens all the time. But if you notice over the years, when there isn't this new sound or this new wave, whatever of music, music always goes back to traditional soul. Did you ever notice that?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, those great soul records, they sound, oh my God, now that's the stuff. And it is true. It really does happen.
I definitely agree. And what did you think about the whole innovation of MTV, where prior to that, the only way you could see your artist was to go to their concerts or a live in-store appearance, and you can just turn on the TV, see a video, and that was at that point when image started to override the music.
Right. Well, see, let's be fair about that. Now, in those days, back in the 60s, And even earlier than that, the only way in Europe to really promote a record was on television to really, hit the masses. And that's why when, they started MTV here, that's why Duran Duran and groups like that became popular here, because they had videos of them because they were English groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really the only way to promote a record over in Europe, was really through TV. And it caught on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree, because over in Europe, like over in England, you had the legendary Top of the Pops. In Germany...
Oh, that Top of the Pops, absolutely. That was really very important, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And over in Germany, you had Music London, and then, of course, in the U.S., you had your occasional shows like your Midnight Special with Wolfman Jack, great radio personality, American Bandstand, Dick Clark, and, of course, Soul Train with Don Cornelius. And with Soul Train, that was really the first exposure nationwide of, like, urban music, because prior to that it was kind of like urban artists, R&B music, well, black music back then as it was called, wasn't really getting that much national exposure, in my opinion. You can correct me on that.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy, because I always lean towards black music anyway. I mean, that to me is that to me hits the nerve center, black music. It always has. There's something that triggers those bones, that gets those bones moving. And I don't mean, and I'm not talking about a dance track, I'm just talking about even a ballad. There's just something, about a great soul ballad that it's such a class by itself that everybody reacts to it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody.
Mm-hmm. And, okay, now with New Wave, it also came in hip-hop. Then hip-hop took the whole breakdown beat session, and with DJs and everything, and from the ground up, it's now a billion-dollar genre and making money, and its music is in commercials. So how did you feel about hip-hop in its early stages, and then, of course, the powers that be earlier on not really getting it?
Well, I liked hip-hop. I liked hip-hop when it first started. I didn't like where the music was going when it started showing some of its negative sides.
Mm-hmm.
I think you know what I mean with this, with like it led to rap and the negative rap, and I just don't think music should be negative. I just think music should be positive, because it does. Music has a way of bringing people together. It really does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree, because you had your records out back in the day, like Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight.
Oh, wasn't that great? Oh, I think that's one of the slickest records I ever heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they reduplicated.
And they were really ahead of their time with that one.
Mm-hmm.